Hello and welcome to another episode of the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron, and all the way from South Korea, Dennis Dow. What's up, fellas?
What is up?
What's going on, boys?
Guys, I am suffering from NBA withdrawal right now. We've been a couple days without games. It's causing me some anxiety, but we're going to talk post All-Star break right now. We're going to talk top storylines, playoff predictions, award predictions. But just a reminder, you can always listen to the NBA Outlet on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, and Google Play. But let's get started with the storylines. Obviously, going to the post All-Star break, we have somewhere between, depending on which team, 20 to 25 games left. Before we talk about the playoff teams and the good teams, let's talk about the bad teams. How many teams do you think will tank in this last portion of the season?
Honestly, I mean, it's really funny because I'm looking at the standings now, and the worst team in the East, Atlanta, they have 18 wins, and in the West, the worst team also has 18 wins, and that's the Suns. But the Mavericks, Kings, Grizzlies, and Magic also have 18. The Nets have 19. So there could be a lot of teams that decide to just tank. Obviously, the Nets have no reason to tank, but it seems like this could be an unprecedented year for like the number of teams that are going to be tanking. And it's funny because the other teams, like it's so close in the playoff race, like it could have huge implications for who gets in the playoffs and who doesn't. So there could be a lot of teams tanking.
7 teams right now out of our 30 teams in the league are under 20 wins. So almost a third of the league has less than 20 wins. And it's funny because most of them are in the West, which is comical since the West is always seen as the better division or conference. Mark Cuban even said it. The Mavericks should tank. So it looks like they're probably going to start laying it in. Maybe Dirk will get more minutes his probably final year. The Suns, are they going to get much better? Probably not. I'm pissed the Atlanta Hawks have 2 more wins than I predicted. I really wanted them to get 16. I thought that would have been comical. The bottom teams in the East, but like all of these teams, like none of them are going to get much better. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see Sacramento buy out a bunch of their veterans and then just really sell hard on being terrible. Because you already got rid of George Hill. Zebo, you're pretty much wasting him and Vince Carter. You might as well buy them out, too, if you're going to get rid of George Hill. You might as well just go young on the rookies and just lose games.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like you guys mentioned, there's a good amount of teams. In my eyes, I see the Hawks, the Magic, the Bulls, the Knicks, the Suns, the Mavericks, the Kings, the Grizzlies. Dennis mentioned the Nets. They don't have their picks, so they probably won't tank, but they'll still have a bad record. So it's just like there's going to be a good amount of teams probably that are under 25 wins. Do you think teams are really going to push to get that number 1 pick at the end and like lose games intentionally, or it's just going to be kind of like, all right, we're just going to play all of our young guys and see what happens?
Well, I think that there are teams that are going to do that for the number 1 pick, especially because I think the lottery rules are changing next year, right? The lottery odds. So this might be the worst year for it, but in some cases, I think that it could be a good thing to play their young guys. Like I know, Ntilikina for New York, like he's still not getting a lot of minutes. So they don't really know what they have with him. And that's the same with some of the other teams with their younger guys. Like the Grizzlies, for some reason, are still playing, Marc Gasol 30 minutes a game, whatever they're doing. So, yeah, I think that's the case is just, if you're this bad, I don't think I could resist if I were a coach or GM and just saying, hey, like, let's just see what these young guys have. Let's let them get some minutes, let them play, let's see what we have with them, and then see kind of what we need when we go to the draft. But, I really don't follow college basketball. I did in the past, but I have heard that this is going to be a deep draft. Like there's a lot of guys who they think are going to be good NBA players. So from what I've heard, it's like 5 or 6 really good guys at the top of the board. So in that case, if you end up getting a 5th or 6th pick, it's not, it's not going to be that big of a drop off from what I've done, like the littlest research. So So don't take that to the bank or anything. But yeah.
No, that sounds about right. I think like there's a 5 or 6 guys that seem like they're locks that people are saying are going to be very good NBA players, like all-star level type of guys. A few maybe possible big-time stars. But what do you think, Kory? Like, so you mentioned like so many of these teams are so close in the rankings. Like, what's going to be the decision that like separates them? Like you mentioned, 5 to 6 teams, and we have 8 teams tanking. Like, what's going to make the difference about who gets in that top 5 pick range?
I mean, I hate to say it, but like injuries, for example, like the Knicks losing Kristaps Porzingis, like I even forgot. I mean, they have 23 wins, but realistically, is this team gonna win 10 games to end the year?
I believe they're 0-4 without Porzingis.
Right. All right. So I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes, 2-15, or I know they have like 25 games left, but like that team's gonna struggle hugely without him, especially with Tim Hardaway Jr. being so. It really depends on like certain. The Knicks are a perfect example. If you like you mentioned Dennis and Frank Nicotina, I can't do it.
Ntilikina, something like that.
Ntilikina. Yeah. I know that he pronounced it twice when I watched the video, like 2 different ways to even pronounce his name. Like he doesn't even know which way it goes. But for them, like you might as well just play your rookie. You got Emmanuel Mudiay. Play those young guys, give them reps, and lose. Same thing with the Grizzlies are in a worse shape because they're going to start playing Tyreek Evans, and they're going to start probably winning more games than they should. But like some of these teams, if you have like a veteran or older guys, maybe the Grizzlies do like limit Marc Gasol's minutes because Conley's already gone. Like I think certain guys will have to get minutes lowered, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see one of these teams like shut down some of their bigger players to protect them either from injury or just so, like you said, they can get one of those top lottery picks. Because honestly, I'm looking at like the draft product, like Trae Young, Michael Porter, DeAndre Ayton, Michael Porter, Marvin Bagley. You got that guy Luka Doncic from Slovenia. This is actually a pretty steep draft. Like 1 through 10. If you have a 1 through 10 pick, you're probably going to get a prospect that may not be an all-star, but he could be borderline all-star material.
Above average starter. He could be a player on a contending team. Talking about, before we get on the positive stuff, any coaches you think will be fired or be on the hot seat, going to the offseason that might lose their job?
I think Steve Clifford from Charlotte, I think he could be on the hot seat, only because we already know they're probably going to change out their GM for Mitch Kupchak, right, from the Lakers. So maybe they just go full house, because I'm sure if they get a different GM, I'm sure Steve Clifford probably is on the way out too. They probably
it's pretty common. House. Pretty common when you switch GMs that you maybe switch the coach too, just because they get on the same, eye to eye type of thing. What about guys like Alvin Gentry, Jeff Hornacek, Mike Malone? Any of those guys you think will be on the hot seat, possibly fired?
I think Mike Malone, I think he's okay. In terms of Alvin Gentry, I think that one is like, I think it's if he makes the playoffs, I think they'll let him stay. But, part of it could depend on Cousins too. Like, they might go to Cousins and say, hey, we want to keep you. What do you think of Gentry? But, for me, I think it's more interesting, like the teams with interim coaches, like who do they bring in? Like Memphis and Phoenix both have guys that, didn't start the season as head coaches. So to me, it's more interesting about them. Like, but some of the teams that are, that are bad, like, I can't see the Mavericks firing Rick Carlisle.
Yeah, no way.
I don't think the Lakers are going to fire Walton. Budenholzer seems fine.
Frank Vogel's questionable. I don't know what Orlando's thinking.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't think they'd give up on him only because they keep, they got rid of Tobias Harris, Oladipo. Like, they haven't really gave him a stable team. Like, they keep moving out pieces. So I don't know if they'd blame him for their issues.
And they haven't really given them pieces that he would like.
Yeah. Like, Jonathan Simmons is the best Frank Vogel player he's had since his, Orlando tenure.
Yeah, so to me, it just seems like there are teams that are bad, but it seems like their organizations are behind them. I don't know about Dave Yeager in Sacramento. That one's interesting to me just because, I'm not sure like what their feelings are about Yeager, like if they feel like he is the coach of the future or if they decide to go a different direction. So to me, I don't really know, but to me, Sacramento, they have an excuse for losing so much. You know, their team is just, it's really young, and they don't have a guy, you know, they just don't have a superstar player. Like, you know, the Jazz drafted Donovan Mitchell, and the Kings don't have a guy like that.
Yeah.
You know, Fox has had moments, but, you know, he's not Donovan Mitchell.
And Bogdanovich has been their best rookie, arguably. You know, even better than Fox for the majority of the time.
Yeah, I would say he has. And I think Jaeger, like every time I watch a Kings game, he looks so upset. And it's either like he's mad, upset, like disappointed. Like every time I watch, it's just like he's struggling over there. So I don't even know if he wants to stay being the coach. Like,
you know what would be comical? If Dave Jaeger got fired and then they replaced him with David Fizdale. So it's like everywhere as Jaeger goes, Fizdale follows.
Yeah. And honestly, the Grizzlies situation, like Dennis mentioned, like that's kind of confusing too, because I mean, I think all three of us would say David Fizdale was doing a fine job considering Mike Conley went down and all the injuries they've had. So I don't really know what the vibe is in Memphis and Sacramento. But moving on from there,
I think we should just touch too on the Knicks and Jeff Hornacek because of this whole Joakim Noah incident. You know, I don't know how that stems with management either, because now the reports came out that he apparently shoved Joakim Noah first, and he initiated the Did you hear that? Apparently, he's the one. Yeah, apparently he shoved Joakim Noah in that practice that ended up banning Joakim Noah from the arena, but it was all instigated contact-wise by Jeff Hornacek.
Dude, so I'm not even a big Joakim Noah fan, but he would smack the shit out of him. He would smack the shit out of Hornacek. Like, I don't know what he's thinking. And obviously that whole thing with Porzingis last year going to the offseason where he, like, quote-unquote called Porzingis a pussy to Willie Herman Gomez. So, like, I could see that not working out. And Hornacek also played Jarrett Jack, like, a ton of minutes all year. And it's like the vibe from the Knicks organization has been more so they want to see the young guys. So that's been kind of confusing as well.
Well, I mean, I'd say the Knicks might extend him for getting rid of Noah. I mean, they probably want him gone anyway.
They still got to pay him though, so it's not like he's really gone. Like he's gone. He's like the cloud. He's there, but he's not there.
Yeah. Well, him and Luol Deng. It's funny. Yeah. These early 2010 Bulls. They're struggling. They're
somebody ran up their minutes. I wonder what happened. All right, moving on from there, going to this post-All-Star break. Obviously, early in the season, we've seen one team that we'd probably consider competition for Golden State being the Rockets. Any other team out there by the time that the playoffs come are going to be competition for the Warriors where they can push them 6 or 7 games? Can the Cavs get to that level? Can another team get to that level?
For me, I mean, as much as they look horrible on some nights, I just think that the Thunder – I just think that they're not scared of Golden State. I think that has something to do with it. I mean, the West is pretty loaded in the sense of, like, you know, there are just a lot of teams that can play good basketball. Now, granted, like whether or not they can beat the Warriors 4 times, that's another thing. But, you know, as it stands right now, they'd be matched up with Portland in the first round, and in, you know, years prior that was, you know, they dominated them. But you know, I could see the Blazers winning a game or two. In the East, I think the Raptors could give Golden State a little bit of trouble. I mean, I think the Warriors would ultimately win. But in the East, I think the Raptors and Boston. Cleveland, I just don't see it with Cleveland. Even though they have, you know, some new guys, I don't see it. I don't see them being able to compete with any team from the West.
Yeah, you make a great point about OKC. I think OKC has like that. The Thunder only see the Warriors, if that makes sense. Like the only team they're worried about is the Warriors, which I think could be their issue if it comes playoff time. I think they would have to somehow, you know, get past like a Minnesota or something. I don't know if OKC can get past any of these teams. Like, the West, like you said, it's so stacked. Like 1 through 6 has the ability of beating. Well, 3 through 7, I should say, have the ability of beating each other. The Rockets, I think, are safe. The Rockets are the only threat to the Warriors, I still believe. And then the East, I mean, who knows? If the Cavs looked how they did prior to the All-Star break, and let's say they somehow win, you know, 20 of their next 25, and they finish, you know, above 50 wins, then I might have more faith in them. Toronto's three-point shooting is the one thing that scares me. I think at the end of the day in the East, it's still Boston that gives them the best, only because they seem to, you know, raise their game another level when they play the Warriors. They have the defense. But even still, there's no team I see besides the Rockets that win more than 2 games off this Warriors team. And even if that, there's more likely every team's going to get swept by the Warriors if they're playing besides 3 teams.
Good point, Kory. But moving on from there, let's talk playoff picture. Eastern Conference, you guys mentioned maybe Toronto, maybe Boston could do something, Cleveland if they get everything together. But looking at it right now, let's talk about the 1 seed first. Toronto currently has the best record in the East. Boston's 2 games behind. The Cavs are 6.5 behind. Who do we think is going to land with the first seed by the time it's playoff time?
Toronto.
I'm going Boston. I think the Celtics end up overtaking them.
I'm going with Toronto as well because I like their depth. I think they can get away with kind of resting their guys sometime, and Lowry probably is kind of flying under the radar a little bit. They should be able to kind of play those young guys where Boston's kind of struggling. I think that Gordon Hayward injury is hurting them more now than it did all season long. So I think they might kind of go on the more the lenient side and be like, the second seed's not as big a deal. We kind of need to get some rest for Kyrie because they don't have as much depth in terms of playmakers and scorers. So that could hurt them. Any chance the Cavs catch these guys or no?
No, I don't think so.
The only way the Cavs can catch them is if they struggle. You know what I'm saying? I think the Cavs will be good, but I think the Raptors and Celtics will be just as good. So I just don't think they'll be able to gain on them. Not that they're not going to have a good second half. I still think they can catch them. Yeah,
6.5 games is no joke, especially with only 20 plus games left. All right, let's look at that 3, 4, 5 situation and 6 because even the East from 3 to 9 is not that far apart. So 6.5 games between all those teams. But at number 3, Cleveland, number 4, Washington, number 5, Indiana, 6, Milwaukee, 7, Philly, 8, Miami, 9, Detroit. Who do we think lands? Let's just assume Cleveland lands at 3rd seed. What do we see the situation at 4, 5, and 6?
It's all right. So the Bucks are scary right now. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucks make a run. Me being the Pacers fan, I just think the Pacers are going to kind of fall back down in the standings. I think the first half was an incredible. We've already shocked and blew away all expectations. I kind of see the Pacers falling down to more of a 7th seed. And I really think the Pistons are going to go on a run here. That Blake Griffin was there for all of 2 weeks. They already looked a lot better. Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin look really good in the front court together. I think those teams will rise between the Bucks and the Pistons. I think the Sixers might just miss out in the playoffs.
Yeah, I will say this about the Sixers real quick, though. The Sixers have the easiest remaining schedule out of any NBA team.
Yeah, that's what I was going to touch on is, Indiana and Milwaukee, they've both had, just looking at Basketball Reference at the moment, they do a little strength of schedule metric. And according to that, I think Indiana's had the 27th hardest schedule and Milwaukee's had the 25th. Like you mentioned, Philadelphia's had a really tough schedule so far, so the rest of theirs are not so tough. So, I mean, I could see, kind of like Kory said as well. I think Indiana, they've done really well, for the start of the year. I think they get in. I think that either Miami or Detroit misses out of the playoffs. That's what I would bet on, just because I kind of feel like the Sixers, I don't see them getting into the top 4, but I think they could get to the 5th seed possibly. I'm kind of waiting on the Bucks to make a move. The Wizards have done pretty well without John Wall, but they still have quite a few games to go before he comes back. So I think Cleveland's kind of locked into that 3 seed, but in terms of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, I mean, you could see, I mean, who knows? Like Kory said, Detroit could go on a run and end up the 4 seed. Milwaukee could be the 4 seed. So it'll be interesting, all the moving and shaking that happens in the Eastern playoff standings.
Well, you guys have mentioned Washington. They're sitting at number 4 right now, and they have the 2nd toughest remaining schedule. Could you see a situation where the Wizards fall out of the playoffs if John Wall doesn't come back? Obviously, they played well, but John Wall is still one of the best point guards in the league.
If the schedule is that tough, then anything is possible because that bench unit is bad. I'm pretty sure Tim Frazier is going to be out for at least 2 more weeks. So he broke his nose or whatever. I don't know. I don't think they can fall out of the playoffs though. Because I think John Wall still gets back in time for them to at least hold on to an 8 seed. But I'll say that they could be a team that has to fight for that 8th seed to the end of the season. I don't know if they're going to miss the playoffs though.
I mean, I think that they've shown, Satoransky's been really good for them. in Wall's absence. Otto Porter and Bradley Beal have been pretty good for them too. They do have some games they can win coming up, but they still have 2 to play against Boston, 2 against Cleveland. They got Golden State. They've got to play Houston. They've got 2 games with the Pacers, 2 games with the Pacers, 2 with the Heat, 1 with the Bucks. So those are going to be some pretty awesome games just because, they could really determine whether or not they get into the playoffs. And they've also got 2 against the Spurs. So the Wizards have a pretty tough remaining schedule, but I just can't see them missing the playoffs. I think even with Wall hurt, I think they just have too much talent to miss. But I could see them going to the 8th seed, which would be a disaster if you're the Raptors or the Celtics and you end up having to play the Wizards in the first round.
Especially if it's a healthy John Wall. If he comes back feeling good,
Yeah,
obviously he didn't look great the whole season, but him coming back, he's one of my favorite players to watch when healthy. But let's just agree that Toronto, Boston, and Cleveland are going to stay in the top 3. Give me your 4th or 8, the remaining seeds. Who do you think is going to land each spot?
Ooh.
All right.
You can take a second.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I got Bucks 4th. God damn you. Bucks 4th. Because now, you say this, it's on the record. Anyone can go back to this. I'm stuck here. All right, so I'm gonna say Bucks 4th. I think the Pistons are gonna get up to 5th.
Ooh.
Wizards are gonna be 6th. Pacers 7th, and I'm gonna say Heat 8th. I still think the Sixers slip out.
Well, Philly fans are coming for your head top, but Dennis, what do you got?
Actually, I have the same idea. I think the Bucks are going to go to the 4th seed. I don't know. I think the Wizards are 5th. I like Philadelphia 6th. I think Indiana, or I think Miami misses out. I think Detroit.
Somebody's got to miss out. That's the issue here.
I think Detroit is 7, and I think Philadelphia is 8.
I see. Wait. Where did I say Detroit was? Did I say Detroit was 5th?
Yeah.
No, please change that to Detroit being 9th, and Detroit misses, and the Sixers end up being. All right, let me just redo it. Bucks 4th. Oh God, forget it. I don't think the Pistons make the playoffs though. I don't think the Pistons.
Yeah, I think if I'm gonna make a bet, I would probably go with the Pistons or the Heat not making the playoffs. I agree. I think the Bucks could get some traction. Obviously, getting healthy, and they played a lot better without Jason Kidd as their coach. Pacers, I think, like you mentioned, Kory, might drop a few spots. Milwaukee get up there. I have Philly pretty much locked in. I really like Joel Embiid, and I really like Ben Simmons, and I just think that it's super important for that team moving forward to make the playoffs.
Well, here's the thing: is I could see the Sixers going on a great I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that the Sixers got the 4 seed. I think they could do that.
Only 2 games back. Back. It's not
only
very far.
2 back. I just think the Miami Heat, I think they missed the playoffs, and honestly, I think they missed because of Dwayne Wade. I think that him coming back to Miami, everybody's like, oh, it's so great, but I think it's the worst move they could have made. I think that I just think that they messed with what they had. I think they had a nice kind of OH night, we rely on different guys and we do this way. And I think Dwayne Wade coming in, and he's going to be he's Dwayne Wade. So it's going to be one of those things where I think that, he's going to be playing crunch time. He's going to be having them go through him on offense at the end of the game. And I just think that they're going to lose a lot of games because they're letting Dwayne Wade pretend to still be Dwayne Wade. I hated that move for them. I hated that they, made the trade for him. I just think it's a terrible, terrible move on their part.
And the Heat have really struggled offensively. So, they're really missing Dion Waiters this year, and him being out and injured, I think is hurting their offense because they just don't have that same spark defensively. Dwayne Wade doesn't help either, and they've already been a pretty good, solid defensive squad. So I personally, I could see the Heat dropping out. Detroit and Miami are the 2 teams that I think will be competing for that 8th spot. A lot could change, and injury could change all this, and I could be completely wrong, but I'm on the Sixer bandwagon. But moving on to the West, we got a competition for the 1 seed here too. Obviously, Houston has the best record in the NBA right now, and Golden State's only a half game behind. Who finishes with the first seed in the West?
I think the Warriors do. The Rockets have a pretty tough schedule. I think their next 16 games, which I had looked this up, I think their next 16 games they play a lot of winning teams. I think there's only 2 teams they play that are less than 500, and 10 of the games are on the road. I mean, they've got a really tough stretch of games in their next 16. I'd have to, obviously look that up.
I think they're like top 15 in terms of toughest schedule remaining, and Golden State is
Golden State had a really tough schedule to start the season. And I think that, I think the All-Star break is good for them, and I think they're getting to the point where they're tired of people talking about how they, maybe they don't have what they had in previous years. And I think they go on one of those like pissed off runs where they just destroy everybody.
It's about that time.
Yeah, I think the Warriors finished with the 1 seed as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw one of those, 20 straight wins from the Warriors, because it seems like every team has had one of those big win streaks. The Rockets had one, the Cavs had one. I think the Warriors had like a semi-big one, but I wouldn't be surprised. They had the All-Star break, they got some time off. Like you said, Dennis, the noise, everyone hears the noise, especially Kevin Durant. He's on his 5th burner account right now. But I'm sure they go on a run and they take that 1 seed.
Yeah, it seems like it's just easier for the Warriors to go on that type of run because they have so many guys where, Houston obviously has some good players across the board, but it's mostly James Harden, Chris Paul. So it's kind of easier for Golden State, and the schedule-wise, I think it'll help. And Golden State doesn't really care, I think, about the 1 seed as much, so there's not as much pressure. Houston knows they need the 1 seed, and it's a big deal to them, especially in a 7-game series against Golden State. But let's move on to the rest of the West, which is super close. The 3rd seed, San Antonio Spurs, and the 10 seed, Utah Jazz, are only separated by 4.5 games. And it came out today that Popovich believes that Kawhi Leonard will not return this season. So let's start with the Spurs. Dennis wrote a great piece talking about their schedule, how it's difficult remaining. I believe they have the toughest remaining schedule in the NBA. Could the Spurs fall out of the playoffs?
Absolutely. I think they could. And I say that I'm a big Spurs fan. Like I love the Spurs, but I just think that, there are times when it just catches up with you. And I mean, they could win, they could be a 49, 48 win team and not make the playoffs. Like that could happen. I don't think that they have a losing record or anything, but going, they're 35-24. They've got 23 games left. Going 15-8 might not be good enough to get them into the playoffs. I'm not sure about that. It depends on what other teams do, but just with Portland, Denver, Utah has been playing so well right now. I just think there's so many teams that are hungry and have more talent at this point than San Antonio. I just think it's going to be tough for them to maintain what they do. So while I think that it is possible San Antonio could miss the playoffs, it's probably more likely that they get, maybe they drop and they get a 7 or an 8 seed. So it just depends. But I hadn't heard that about Kawhi, so that is breaking news to me.
Yeah, I think it just Popovich just said it like less than 30 minutes ago, right before we started this podcast. So, that's a pretty big deal in terms of the Spurs. And, you have to think about the morale of the team, knowing you're not going to get back your best player being Kawhi. Like, that definitely hurts the team. What do you think, Kory?
Yeah, I don't think the Spurs missed the playoffs. It's kind of one of the situations where they're so well coached and they just play such good team basketball that I just can't see them falling out of the playoffs. Not that to take anything away from those teams fighting for that last playoff seed, and the Clippers and the Jazz. Clippers obviously have surprised all of us. The Jazz too. Quinn Snyder, shout out to him. He always does a great job in Utah. The defense always stays good no matter who is in the lineup. And Jay Crowder is going to give them another boost. I like Dennis said, I think it's not unrealistic to think that without Kawhi, if he is done for the year, which is tragic for basketball and all of us, that they end up down in like a 6 or a 7 seed, which still is, kind of perfect in a way, because I don't think the Rockets or the Warriors would really want to play the Spurs in the 7-game series in the first round, even without Kawhi. Because they're just one of those teams that's very nagging, and they're going to give their best, especially to those two teams. And I'm sure James Harden has nightmares about Manu Ginobili still.
Yeah, I mean, it could go both ways for the Rockets. I mean, James Harden could look at it as like a redemption. It would be a lot easier to go off on the Spurs without Kawhi Leonard. But I think they'd be a team that are going to make you beat them, in terms of a first-round series with a top team. They'll probably still lose, but the other team's going to have to earn the W. What team do you think let's just assume the Spurs are going to lose the third seed because Kawhi's out and, they have the toughest remaining schedule. What team do you think wants that third seed the most in the West?
I think it's the Thunder. I think Russell Westbrook and company want that. I don't know if it really matters to them. I'm sure they just want home court because, as we know, the fans in OKC love their basketball. But I think they're a team, especially now that they've had half a year to get back on track or try and figure things out between their big three. I actually expect them to have a huge jump off this second half.
I would probably go with the Thunder as well. I think that the Timberwolves, there's just something about the Timberwolves. I don't know. I mean, they've played well this season, but I think there's something to the fact that like Jimmy Butler sat out the All-Star game, and it's just tough with Minnesota. I think they're just so up and down from night to night, and that's a lot of teams in the West. So honestly, I could see the Timberwolves. I could see the Thunder as the 3 seed. I could see the Nuggets, making a move. I mean, they're going to get Paul Millsap back
Very
soon.
underrated. Very underrated.
They could end up with that 3rd seed. And this reminds me of that. What was that? 2015 playoffs where the on the last night of the season the Spurs lost, and it dropped them to the 6th seed. Yep. From the 3rd seed, and they ended up playing the Clippers in the first round. So, in some ways, I think that the Thunder, I think the Thunder want that 3 seed just because I think they would prefer to play the Warriors in the second round instead of the Rockets. I think for some reason, I just think that they just think and they feel that they can just destroy the Warriors. So I think they want that 3 seed to have that second round matchup with the Warriors.
If they were to play the Warriors and they were to say they were to win the second round, they wouldn't even need to win a title in their eyes. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would be one of those things where Russell Westbrook would be like, mission accomplished. Like, I told you, Kevin Durant, I was coming for you. Like, that's all I needed. The Rockets would probably beat him in 6 games, and we'd move on with our lives.
It definitely would be a great storyline. But
I would just real quick. I would also say that I think that the Thunder as an organization, they want a high seed because, I think anything that they can do for that is gonna help with the Paul George situation.
Yep.
I kind of think he re-signs there anyway. I really do. I really think he's going to re-sign there, but I think finishing as a top 3 seed would just show to him like, hey, we're not that far away from Houston, Golden State. Steven Adams is, becoming an awesome player. Carmelo, we have him for another season, but after that we can get rid of his contract and get in a better player. So I just think that they have some things that they can build on to convince Paul George to stay, especially if they get that 3 seed.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, Kory and I have had some conversations that we believe Paul George and Westbrook has helped the cause of Paul George coming back. And then I think if you look at it, they get a top 3 seed. They have a good series with Houston. They have a good series with Golden State. You can kind of attract some more veteran free agents as well. When you have stars like Paul George, Westbrook, and even Carmelo to some extent, maybe more so Steven Adams, and they have a few guys on the bench that can still get better. So OKC, I think, really wants that 3rd seed. But let's do what we just did for the East. Give me your 3 through 8 in the West. Let's just assume Houston and Golden State obviously at 1 and 2.
I'm going to go OKC at the 3, Minnesota at the 4. I'm going to go Denver 5. Actually, I changed that. Denver 4, Minnesota 5. I'm going to go Portland 6, San Antonio 7, and number 8, I'm going to go Utah.
All right.
So I would say the Pelicans and the Clippers are out. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty similar on yours. So I have Thunder 3rd, Timberwolves 4th. I think the Spurs only fall to 5th. Nuggets 6th, Blazers 7th, and I got faith. I think Utah gets the 8th seed. I think the Pelicans struggle a little bit without Cousins in the second half.
Yeah. I like Utah to get in there. They have some really good momentum, and I think people like slept on them so much because Rudy Gobert was banged up so much in the beginning of the season, and now him back. Mitchell obviously hitting the stride. They just got a whole bunch of pieces that seem to be working out. Jay Crowder seems to be fitting in nicely, and like Kory mentioned earlier, Quinn Snyder's a guy who's been doing a great job in Utah for a few seasons now. So, I mean, I think that the Pelicans don't make the playoffs, it could really have a major blow to their organization. Obviously, we saw the comments by Anthony Davis this past week. So that's something to keep an eye on as well.
Also, the Jazz, they don't have like an overly tough schedule. You know, when they come back, they play Portland, then they play Dallas, Houston, Minnesota, but then they play Sacramento, Orlando, Indiana, Memphis. They have a Phoenix, Sacramento, Atlanta. Like they play Dallas twice still, Memphis 3 times. Like there's a lot of bad teams left on their schedule.
Yeah, and obviously scheduling is going to be make a big difference, especially when we talked about those bad teams earlier, that some of these teams could be tanking, and that could be 20, 30-point blowouts. That doesn't only allow you to get a W, but it gives you rest for your players to win against some of those bigger matchup teams. But playoff-wise, that's our wrap-up from there. Obviously, we'll probably do predictions at another point in the season, but post-All-Star break, that's what Dennis and Kory are thinking. Let's talk awards. Let's start with the big award. I don't think there's much discussion on this, but who's winning MVP?
Should we all just shout it out at once?
James Harden.
The person who doesn't say it loses? Okay.
Yeah, I think James Harden. The only case that Harden doesn't win, I think, is if Cleveland goes on some crazy thing where they don't lose another game, I think you could make a case for LeBron, but I just don't see Harden not winning. I think you have to give it to him with what the Rockets have been able to do.
And I think the fact that everybody is just so obsessed with statistics, Dalton Pence just wrote a great article for OTG, and Harden leads the NBA in 6 major statistical categories. Last year, obviously, was all about stats with Westbrook getting triple-doubles, so Harden's making sure his numbers are there. So I think he's pretty much a lock, and like you said, Dennis, unless the Cavs go on some ridiculous 15-game winning streak or something, but it's not out of this world to think, LeBron could definitely get his name in there. Rookie of the year.
Donovan Mitchell.
Damn, yep, where I agree. So far we're 2 for 2. James Harden, Donovan Mitchell.
I'm going Ben Simmons. I
think the reason I think Mitchell is going to get it is I just think that unfortunately for Ben Simmons, his outstanding play happened at the beginning of the season. And I think that Mitchell's just kind of his tear that he's gone on, and the success that the Jazz have had, I think that is just it's just too much. Now if the Sixers, if they go on again, it's all about, I think, team with this is that, if Ben Simmons plays well and the Sixers get to the 4 or 5 seed, I could see that shifting. But right now I would have to say Mitchell.
It's kind of crazy though, but because Ben Simmons is leading rookies in assists, rebounds, steals. He's second in points per game, 3rd in blocks. He's just doing everything. It's just he's consistently been doing this all year, and he hasn't had that super big pop like Donovan Mitchell has on this 11-game winning streak. But it's Ben Simmons, I think, is the rookie of the year, but he doesn't have the same flash. And I honestly think
that's a good point.
Yeah, I think for me too, this is kind of that flash, the flash effect. I've watched Donovan Mitchell pretty much, carry the Jazz to 30 wins. I understand Joe Ingles has been very good, and Ricky Rubio has been good as of late, and Gobert's been back. And when he is in the lineup, he's been good. But I feel when I look at the Sixers, it's Embiid and Simmons, and when I look at the Jazz, I see Mitchell and company kind of thing. Even though Rudy Gobert's been great, but he's been in and out. But I still I don't know. When I think of best rookie, I honestly think of Donovan Mitchell either dropping 35 on a team, or being one of the first rookies to score 5 30+ point games his first year. Just the simple things he's done. And like you said, though, when it comes to being, filling up a stat sheet and doing everything, Ben Simmons has far and above been the best rookie in that category.
Yeah, and obviously people are just going to make the talk about his shooting being an issue, but I think people also are forgetting the fact that he's just a freak of an athlete. There's not many guys in the league that can guard Ben Simmons, especially when he adds a jump shot. I'm not saying Donovan Mitchell won't be great, but there's more 2-guard stoppers and guard stoppers and wing stoppers in the league than there are for 6'9", 6'10" playmakers that have, similar skill sets to a LeBron James. Obviously, the shooting isn't there, but I think Ben Simmons is just kind of getting undersold. And also, I think Embiid getting all that hype and Embiid being the big talker on the team kind of takes some of the attention away from Simmons, where he does some of the small things that really do matter that you just don't notice quite as much.
Yeah, I think, well, just to touch on the Rookie of the Year thing too, I think that people could make something as well of the Sixers, how they've struggled without Joel Embiid. And that they might use that as a point too of like, oh well, without Joel Embiid on the floor, Ben Simmons, like he's struggled to help the Sixers win games.
Well, I would make a counter argument. I'd be like, well,
sure.
Also Donovan Mitchell, the Jazz aren't even technically in the playoffs right now. So they didn't really start going on that big 11-game winning streak or 10-game winning streak, whatever it is, until Gobert got back. So I think there's a correlation when you have, your best big in there. So I think that really, really does matter. But like I said, 6-man, I think we'll probably all agree on this one. Lou Will?
Yeah, I think it has to be. I think it has to be. I think it has to be Lou Williams, just because usually it seems like 6-man equates to like which guy is averaging the most points off the bench. I mean, you could make a case for Tyreek, but with the Grizzlies being really terrible, I think that it has to be Lou Williams. Yeah,
I mean, agree. The only like argument someone could make is like, oh, Lou Williams started X amount of games for the Clippers, and someone might want to vote Eric Gordon, but I think it's Lou Wills to lose. Most improved player.
So. Ooh,
I know Kory's picking.
Do you though? Do you really?
Do you, Oladipo?
See, it's like the inner me says it's Victor Oladipo, but then like a part of me really like Giannis has really elevated his game again, and then Chris Dunn was really good this year before he got hurt. But yeah, Victor Oladipo for sure.
I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about this one. Most improved is always so tough to me because it's like, could you really give it to Giannis? I mean, he was really good last year. I mean, statistically, obviously, I would have to go with Oladipo as well, but it's such a weird award to me. Like it just, because you could also make a case for possibly, Joel Embiid. Like, he has shown some improvement. But I don't know. I mean, I think Oladipo is the easy pick. Yeah.
I think Oladipo, Kory wrote a great piece on OTG about Oladipo and all the career highs he's hitting this season. But I think just from a standpoint of Oladipo last year, we thought of him maybe as an above average starter at best. We didn't think he was anything special. Now he's an all-star on the Pacers, and he's the face of that franchise, and he's somebody they're probably going to build around. So he kind of made a really big jump in terms of his career. I would say Porzingis, if he didn't get hurt, would probably have some votes as well, because I think he's taken a big jump, especially when you look at the Knicks now. Without him going 0-4, I think that's an impact. And then just a quick shout out to my boy Spencer Dinwiddie, who went from being backup point guard to above average starter.
Yeah.
But defensive player of the year.
I'm going with Paul George on this.
He's been disruptive. He's been really disruptive. He's got a lot of deflections on the season. Last time I checked, he was top of the league. I know he was top of the league in steals as well. So that's not a bad pick.
I think I'd go Durant.
I could see that too. Personally, I'm going to go Rudy Gobert. Obviously, you guys can tell that I like Gobert, but I'll give you a stat for him. He ranks 7th in the league in defensive points saved by NBA math, and he's missed a ton of time. And that's a stat that's accumulated. So the fact that he's already top 7 and he's missed so much time, by the end of the year, he could really get up there.
Jeez, Nick, you're such a stat nerd. No. Yeah, I think Gobert's a good pick. I think Horford could get some consideration too. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one as well, just because I really like the pick of Paul George, just because I think he's up there in steals and deflections, but just in terms of one-on-one defense, like he is so good as a defender, and he is carrying a big burden on offense as well. And I just think that not enough gets made about guys like him that, aren't going to block a lot of shots, that, are just playing great individual defense. So I would go Durant though, just because I think, I think he's become the rim protector for Golden State. And while Golden State has struggled somewhat defensively, I think that they still have moments where they can shut people down. So I would go Durant.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, Durant has definitely made an effort to step up in that aspect of his game. And the fact that he can guard multiple positions, there's not really many players he can't defend except maybe quick, speedy guards, but he could probably chase down, block them. So, I mean, this
Yeah.
is a lot of guys up for Defensive Player of the Year. Usually it's like a 2 or 3 man race, but you could argue there's about 4 or 5 guys. Like Joel Embiid has caught some hype. You mentioned Al Horford. Like, I
Derrick
really,
Draymond's
Rose.
always in it.
yeah,
Draymond's
Draymond's
got to be in it
always
too.
there because his versatility is just, great. But I don't know. That's one I'm actually really intrigued about. Usually Defensive Player of the Year we don't really talk a ton about, but this year I think it could be a little bit different.
Real quick, Defensive Player of the Year. While you guys were saying names, I said Derrick Rose is a joke, and I'm just making sure that people know that I don't really think that was a joke, but everybody was. Never mind. Okay, Coach of the Year.
Coach
You
of the
mean
Year.
you don't think Derrick? I can't say on a podcast if you don't think Derrick Rose is the best
Okay.
defensive player of all point guards. Damn.
Coach of the Year, I think it has to be Dwayne Casey. I think that myself included, like I thought the Raptors were done. Like I thought this is it. They're going to blow it up. They're going to fire Casey. They're not going to be as good this year. And for them to just change the way that they've played and when you I've had the chance to listen to a couple of podcasts that he's done, and he's just really open about it. He's like, we had to change the way that we played. And I think that when coaches are that open about it, I think that's really cool that they're just willing to say, like, what we were doing wasn't working, so we had to do this. I think it's a 2-man race, though, between him and Stevens. I don't think Kerr or D'Antoni win it. D'Antoni because he won it last year, right? Didn't D'Antoni win it last year?
Yep, he
Yeah,
did.
he did.
And
Yeah,
I
he did.
think Steve Kerr does. I don't think Steve Kerr can win it because of all the things like the backlash that would come because they're like, well, his players coached or whatever. So I would have to say Casey
Andre
or Brad.
Iguodala for Coach of the Year.
Yeah, Andre Iguodala, right? That's all he's done this year.
I don't think I don't see an Eastern Conference team winning Coach of the Year. I just think I just feel like it's really between, Houston and Golden State. I feel like whatever team comes out top in the West is going to be Coach of the Year. I just think I don't know. I just feel like they're related and corresponded. Like we know those are the 2 best teams in the league.
Honestly, I'll agree with Dennis because I think Dwayne Casey, you brought up a great point with the system switch. Matt Chin was advocating a lot for that early in the preview pod for the Raptors, and also the player development of the Raptors. Like I've mentioned before, they have a nice depth on their team, a lot of nice young bench players, and I think Casey, if he can get that 1 seed in the East, I think that'll really help his case.
Well, and I just think with Boston, the whole you sign this huge free agent in the offseason and he plays 5 minutes and you still are the 2 seed in the East. I think that'll pick up some steam for them as well. So I think Casey though has the edge, but Brad Stevens I think would be a close second.
Yeah, one thing I can't.
Go ahead, Kory.
Go ahead. I was going to say the one thing I have, and it may not even be a knock. I might be nitpicking. The Raptors have been really good at home, but they're like 3 games over 500 on the road. I don't know, or 5 games. I don't know if that plays any factor into it because like some teams, like for example, the Warriors and Golden State, they're pretty much identical. They got 6 wins at home or 6 losses at home, 6 or 7 on the road. Those teams really don't lose depending on where they are. And for like the Raptors in particular, they've had to been home to get a lot of these wins.
Yeah, and maybe a dark horse candidate. Obviously, I don't think he'll win, but he'll probably get a few votes. Quinn Snyder.
Yeah, I think so.
Given what happened to that team injury wise and whatnot. Executive of the Year.
LeBron
Sam
James.
Presti, I still think it's Sam Presti. I think
Daryl Morey won last year, but I could honestly see him winning again because he brought in Chris Paul. He brought in all these bench pieces, all these role players, and they all just fit in so great. And we're giving them a chance against Golden State to compete for 6 or 7 games. I think that could be a real
I think you
case.
I think you can make a case for Houston. I think there's a case to be made for Minnesota.
True.
To go from being terrible every year to being a top 4 team at the All-Star break. I think that the moves they made were good. But I think Oklahoma City is a strong one as well, just because of what they were able to turn their role players into. Like while Victor Oladipo has become an all-star in Indiana, it's hard to see if he would have been able to do that had he stayed with OKC.
Yeah, I mean, like Oladipo has been great, but I don't envision him being better than Paul George is right now in OKC.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fit of Paul George next to Westbrook would still be a lot better than the fit of this Oladipo on that Thunder's team. Because this Oladipo needs the ball in his hands a lot. The one good thing about Paul George is he's been able to play that off-ball role next to Westbrook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Sam Hinkie could get consideration too, just because Ben Simmons and Embiid have played well. So
yeah, that'd be funny.
Yeah, would they posthumously give it to him? Like, sorry, we fired you. Here's your trophy.
Could the Celtics get it for getting Kyrie if they get the 1 seed?
Maybe Danny Ainge.
You have to consider it. I mean, Ainge is done, and the trade they made.
I think it's more about trading Isaiah Thomas. He should get an award for that. I mean, he dodged a bullet with that one.
Yeah, I mean that trade package.
Bring the Brinks trucks.
That trade package for Kyrie, the Cavs had to trade both those guys, and then the fact he traded the number 1 pick and still ended up with Jason Tatum and Markelle Fultz. Obviously, he didn't know he would struggle like this. But now they have another pick in next season, so I think Ainge could definitely be in the consideration as well.
Maybe, yeah.
But any points back post All-Star break before we get out of here?
I think that I think with Cleveland, I think Cleveland is, as much as I hate, talking about them and reading about them, sometimes it's fascinating because like you have people talking themselves into Jordan Clarkson, Larry Nance, Rodney Hood, like, yeah, we're going to make the finals, which, with LeBron, anything's possible. But I think this Cleveland thing is really interesting. I mean, if they, yes, they won the 2 games before the All-Star break, but if they get out of the gate and they struggle, it'll be really interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most intriguing storylines going into the post All-Star break. Like Kory and I talked about it before off pod. Like I've been keyed in on the Cavs because I really want to see, like you mentioned, Dennis, can LeBron make these young role players great? Obviously, and I mentioned this before in another pod, they've all grown up seeing LeBron being the greatest player, so he can kind of inspire them and kind of get them to play at a level they haven't played before. And a lot of these guys haven't played in the situation that they're going to be in with LeBron in the Eastern Conference Finals and possibly a finals if they're able to get there.
Well, and I think the other thing is, I'll be the first to say, like, I love LeBron James. I think he's the greatest basketball player ever, and we can argue about that another time.
You're arguing with the wrong guy.
I don't think he catches. I don't think he catches enough crap for how he hurts teammates sometimes. Because while he's not Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, like calling guys soft and things like that, I think his passive aggressive stuff that he does, I think he's mastered it. And I think that those guys haven't felt that yet. So, Rodney Hood's, for example, a streaky player. How long before, LeBron has, gets frustrated with him, or, the Jordan Clarkson, is there a time when he's going to take too many shots? Is there, these young guys, like, they haven't felt that LeBron frustration yet. So that'll be interesting to see kind of how they respond to that. I think George Hill will be fine. I think that's a good move for them, although he makes a lot of money, but I think that's a smart move for them because, George Hill is the kind of guy that LeBron wants. But yeah, just with the young guys, I don't know if it's going to be the perfect marriage that people think it's going to be.
One thing I'll say, I like the fit of Nance because I think no matter what he does, he's always going to bring that energy. You're not expecting much to score. Same thing with Jordan Clarkson. Like, he's the one I think that could be worrisome in the fact if he doesn't make shots, because Rodney Hood, at least if he's not knocking down a shot, he can still play some defense. Jordan Clarkson's the one. But also, like, just thinking about it, LeBron hasn't played with a ton of young role players, so it's going to be interesting to see how that relationship is. Like you mentioned, Dennis, he's been passive-aggressive, the guys, but these are young guys, so maybe they'll have a different level of respect for LeBron.
Maybe. That's true. And it'll be interesting as well when, just Kevin Love coming back. Yeah, it's just Cleveland it's a fascinating team. It really is. Like, it's just there's so many, moving parts, and it's hard to know kind of what's going on with them. So, yeah, just interested to see how they do.
15 in a row. I want a hot take. Cavs win 15 in a row at some point post All-Star break. I'm
Ah,
not
good.
saying they don't lose 2 in a row at some point. I'm saying there is going to be some stretch where
They're gonna go
Cavs
on a
will probably
run.
win 15. Yeah, and it's going to be a classic second half. LeBron will probably have 3 or 5 triple doubles in that span. We won't have a care in the world, and they'll lose 2 or 3, and everyone will be like, "Oh boy, yeah, here we go again."
I think Dennis made a great point too in the fact that momentum coming out of the post All-Star break is going to be big for them. If they do hit their groove and they win these first couple games, and they've already won those games, like Kory said, this run could definitely come right now, and that could give the team big confidence and kind of scare some of the teams in the East. Like
And I
nobody
think
wants to face a healthy LeBron.
shifting to the West, I think for me, it's can Utah keep up their streak? Can they keep their momentum from before the All-Star break? Or is it something where the time off has hurt them?
Oh, West-wise, like I'm really intrigued Paul Millsap coming back. I want to see what he can bring to Denver and what they can do because they could use another consistent player like him on both ends of the floor.
Yes, true.
I was say I wouldn't be surprised if the Clippers start coming back down to earth.
Yeah.
A little bit more. They've obviously they're 4 games over 500. No one really expected that tear from Lou Williams. Not that he can't continue that tear. I just think they were the beneficiaries of him having really big games. I just don't see it continuing. He had that one span of like 13 games. I think he had 6 or 7 over 30 or whatever. Not that he can't score like that all the time, but that's just not easy to do for a 6-man.
Yeah, and he's a hot and cold type guy. Like I think we talked about it before, Kory. Last year after he got traded to Houston, he wasn't the same guy. So maybe it could be that later in the season he's not going to keep that type of heat going. But that wraps up for today. Dennis, Kory, great show. As always, thank you everybody for listening. You can check out the NBA Outlet on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, and Google Play.
Thanks, guys.